really it's just about balance. And I'm literally getting people on a regular basis that are sending me messages like, hey, I was about to commit suicide and I watched one of your videos and it changed my life. Like that to me is so huge. If you've just done that for one person, that's game over. That's it. Your work is worth it. You know, you've actually helped people. And I'm sure that's the case with whatever content you're putting out there. I'm sure your music has changed so many people's lives. So it's keeping that in mind and that perspective in mind, then you realize how important it is the work that you're doing is in helping and kind of shape people's lives and people's mindset.
Jay Sean's Basement Banter.
Hello, ladies and gents. Today, I'm really excited, man. I've got a fellow Brit joining us. I first stumbled across his page actually when my brother sent me a link. Okay. Now, Adam, Todd, you guys know, as much as I am a goofball, there is a deeper side to me.
Yes.
Yes, a deep side of me. And that sort of helps me keep grounded, I think, in this mayhem madness industry that we're in. My brother sent me this video of a guy from England. His name is Satpal. And the video was about an hour long. And it was talking about God, religion, philosophy, spirituality in a way that was so different for me, in a way I hadn't heard before. I grew up as a Sikh with my mom and dad telling me, here's the holy book, read some verses from it. I didn't know what they meant. And I had to figure it out along the way if they could keep my interest in Sikhism and in my religion. But Satpal managed to break this down in a way that was so interesting and it kept me gripped for the whole hour. And Adam, I actually sent you the link, remember?
You did, yep.
And anyway, I was like so fascinated by his videos that I started following him on Instagram and started watching more of his videos. And then I hit him up on the DM and I said, Satpal, I'd love to have you on my podcast. And he said, yes. And we are joined by the man himself. My bro, that was a very long intro. I bigged you up quite hard there.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah,
thank you very much.
Even the rappers don't get that much. You know what I mean?
Oh, I'm honored.
Yeah. How you doing, man?
I'm doing really well, man. It's really good to be here. Thank you so much for giving me your time.
Yeah, of course, man. Likewise. And you're in England. I'm sat in Jersey. You're in England, right? At the moment?
Yeah. In London, yeah. In
London. Adam obviously is from London, but he's sat in California, and Todd is in California too. Some of the videos that I watched of yours, bro, you seem to have been doing a tour of, was it America or Canada or something?
I've been lucky enough to tour quite a few different places. I was in New Jersey last year, in Houston and Dallas, Texas earlier this year. So wow, yeah, I've had a chance to tour quite a lot, and then Canada a couple of times as well.
Canada, of course, I'm sure Vancouver probably is where they had, because there's a huge Sikh community in Surrey. That's kind of like Southall for us, you know, because I grew up in Southall. And, you know, for the people who are listening who aren't familiar, because we obviously have a lot of my fans, but we are also getting people who didn't grow up with my music and so therefore don't know too much about my background. But I grew up raised in Southall, in a Punjabi household, a Sikh household. And obviously from my appearance, as you can tell, I didn't keep the turban and the beard or grow the beard. And that was actually my dad's decision. It was funny because growing up born as Sikh, I'd love to hear your opinion on this. There is almost a pressure from family members and external people that, oh, you got a Sikh boy, but he's not growing his beard. He's, you're not going to keep his hair. Oh my God, terrible. And you get this, it's peer pressure almost, isn't it, Satpal, to grow up with the bug and the dari. So can you break that down for me? What are your thoughts on that?
I think you're absolutely right. I think there's a lot of pressure on the outward appearance, especially for young males within the Sikh tradition. And it's almost as though we've got to the point where as long as you look the part, you can pretty much get away with anything and do whatever you want. But really, culturally, everybody wants you to look like you're practicing the spiritual tradition, whether you understand it, whether you know it or whatever. So exactly. I think you're right. There definitely is a lot of pressure on young men to look a certain way within the Sikh tradition. regardless of whether they understand it, why they're doing it. And naturally, we're seeing a lot of young boys now, especially in the West, but maybe even back in India as well, just completely rejecting that external look and feel because they don't know what it represents, what it's about. Nobody's really had the time. And I think we were brought up with parents who pretty much always said, look, don't ask questions. Like we don't really know why you're supposed to do it. We just know it's a good thing. Just do it.
Right. Absolutely, man. And that makes so much sense. And that's what I want to get into. I want to get into the nitty gritty of the why, because I feel like, Adam, you know, you didn't really, you don't practice a certain faith, do you? You're born Christian, but you don't follow it.
Yeah, no, as many, white kids growing up in a secular school, like, Church of England, C of E is kind of like, you got that 1 foot on first base, like just in case we need this, but really it's just Christmas and Easter, and it's just about as, it's just something that seems to be passed on, generationally, but with no real depth or spiritual meaning, certainly for me anyway.
But that's what you're saying, and it's passed on, isn't it? It's passed on just like a family name is, but we don't know why we're keeping it anymore. We don't know. Or a
football team, yeah. It's just,
we don't know. I can guarantee you, most kids probably hate going to church, don't want to go to the Gurdwara on a Sunday. They don't want to do any of that. And then we drag them out of bed. Come on, you have to go. Why, mom? Why, dad? Because you do. And then there might be those who go, listen, if you don't, God's going to get angry with you. Do you want God to be angry with you? Then you get the guilt of God being angry at you like a 7-year-old. Right, Satpal? So like,
I think what happens is it's really interesting that you get young people kind of convinced that doing the God thing is somehow beneficial to you, in the sense that you're going to be rewarded in some way. Like as long as you pray at a certain time of day, or do certain things, or you don't eat certain things, then you're going to do well in your exams and all that sort of stuff. And the reality is a lot of people, especially youngsters now, I see maybe youngsters maybe as young as 13, who by the time they reach that age, they're convinced that there's nothing to religion. They're completely atheist. They don't believe in anything. All of their friends who aren't religious get just as good exam grades. They go on to get great jobs and all that sort of stuff. So we're not really being given anything that helps us to understand, like, how does this actually help you in your life? Because everything that our parents have told us just falls apart. It doesn't really make sense. Doesn't add up in any way.
That to me is one of the most confusing elements as a child, is understanding the why. So my mom used to wake me, and I'm honestly, now as a grown man, I am so grateful that my mom and dad did take the time to teach me about Sikhism, to teach me about to make me pray. And even though I didn't know why I was praying, the reason I'm happy, and the reason why me and Adam talk about this and Todd, is because sometimes, even if you don't know why, you belong somewhere. And at least that's enough. You feel like there's enough other people around you go, oh, we're a little clique. I guess we're a little clique, right? We go to the Gurdwara together. Oh, cool. I belong somewhere. And at least I have that. I'm not alone, right? Even if you don't know what the words are that they're saying, but you have a crew. I remember my manager at the time, ages ago, maybe 10, 12 years ago, we were on a plane. And what do we do? The same thing, right? You know this. The plane's taken off, close our eyes, say our fart, say our prayers, pray to God. God, please don't let this plane crash. God, please don't let this plane crash. Please ask. We say that. And that's something else I want to dig into with you later on, of course. And I was saying it. Juggy was saying it. Rishi was saying it. We all had our eyes closed. And at that moment, my manager felt completely lost. He didn't have anybody to pray to. It's Rob I'm talking about. He didn't have anyone to pray to. And he's just looking out the window and he's looking around. Some Christians, they're doing that. And he felt lost. And he said, I wish at that moment I had someone or something to talk to, somewhere to belong. And I think that feeling enough as a kid or growing up, it's kind of, you feel like you've got somebody who's got your back. And Adam, you always told me that you feel a little lost sometimes like that too, but you don't know where to go because you're not sure if at all, do you need a particular faith to have that kind of.
Well, yeah, it was two questions I wanted to ask you, Satpal, was essentially, being a man that was born, into a family where religion wasn't regarded as important. I often refer to like faith as a gift that I've yet to receive. And as Jay said, you know, you have a clique, you have a group. Like one of my closest friends out here is Alec King. He's a musician, he's Jewish. So straight away you have that whole, again, it's like that whole clique. You got the, you know, that group is like a little gang, you know, and I don't have that. And I don't have that comfort of, you know, when I've seen my friends or myself have gone through tough times, they have the ability to kind of go, well, here you go, I'm going to put that on God. I'm going to pray. I'm going to, you know, I don't understand what's going on, but I'm looking for help. I'm looking for spiritual nourishment. I don't even have that. I mean, I sometimes have prayed in times of stress, but I don't know what I'm putting it onto. It's just a conscious thought of like, please, anyone, you know, help me. So I guess one of my biggest questions would be of, you know, how does one find that if you've not been born into it? It feels a little bit like window shopping. Like, well, what does that one do for me? Well, no, I don't like bacon. No bacon in Judaism. Okay, no, okay, skip that. We'll go. You know, like, you know, it feels strange to me in that regard. So
I think you're right. I think one of the mistakes people make generally when they look at all religions is they assume that every religion is some variation of Christianity. So what you've sort of described to me is faith, God, prayer, and Jay, you even said sort of things around, you know, when I feel uncomfortable, I've got something to go to. What's really interesting for me is I actually don't relate to any of those things myself. So for me, there is no kind of God in the sky that I'm praying to. There's no one that I'm going to for comfort. There's no faith. Because I think it's really important for us to kind of understand like what we mean by some of these things. Like, you know, the most common question anyone, or most common assumption that anyone would make is that, well, a religious person believes in God in some variation or another. They believe in a God. And I categorically say, I don't believe in God. And that's a really strange thing for people to hear, because they think, well, you clearly look religious, so we're gonna assume certain things about you. And the only reason I can say that with so much confidence is because I've spent so much time in meditation, so much time researching and trying to understand the spiritual tradition, and especially the spiritual traditions that come out of India are drastically different to Islam, Judaism, and Christianity. I say drastically different. I think drastically different in how they're practiced today, but I do believe that there is a core that underpins all of them. And I don't think it is about just believing in some God in the sky that kind of gives you that, because, you know, I always say that actually I probably have better conversations and I'm more relatable to atheists than I am to religious people, because the kind of things that I'm talking about are very different to that kind of belief in a God. So I'm with you, Adam. I would struggle to have a belief in a God. And I was brought up with a belief in a God. But I think the more that I've understood my tradition, the less my belief in the kind of the traditional God in the sky has gone. I mean, I completely don't have that relationship with it at all. The interesting question is then, well, what is my practice? What am I doing that's so different to the other traditions? And I don't think it's about a belief in anything. I mean, if you look at the word belief itself, one of the things I love to do is to really kind of break down words so we understand what we're talking about. When you look at the word belief, it means to put your faith in something that you don't know to be true. So like my kids say they believe in the tooth fairy. I could say I believe in aliens. And really what we're saying is, I don't know whether aliens exist, but I believe they exist. And for me, that's just not my practice at all. I am of a very different kind of mindset that says, well, do you believe that the sun exists, or do you know that the sun exists? Do you believe that the moon exists, or do you know that it exists? And clearly all of us would say, well, I don't believe that it's there. I know it's there. I see it every day. And that's what I'm experiencing. I'm going through something through my own spiritual journey where I'm not needing to believe in anything. I'm actually just experiencing something every day.
So the obvious question is, to me, is going to be, if that's the case, then why do you adhere to the uniform of a Sikh, the outward identity? Why Sikhism still then? If you know, if it's for you more about spirituality and stuff, what is there about Sikhism that you love or appreciate or respect that you are going to keep your outward appearance of a Sikh? And therefore, especially Guru Nanak.
Yeah, for me, because that is actually what I've learned by studying this tradition further and further I've gone into it. It's actually made my affiliation towards my teacher and my tradition even stronger, because the deeper I've gone into it, the more I've realized, oh, that's what it was actually talking about. It wasn't just talking about something purely superficial like a god in the sky. It was actually talking about something that's so intrinsic and close to me that now the way I look is just complementary to how my mindset is. I almost say that the way I look is a reflection of the experience that I'm having of life. It's almost like the flowering at the end of the tree, where you've gone through so much growth within yourself. This is how it has flowered. This is how it now looks. I now am comfortable visually expressing myself, and everybody being able to identify me as a follower of this tradition, because this is what the tradition has done for me. There's no part of me that's ashamed of it, embarrassed of it, wants to hide it. I'm saying, no, this is like, I want you to know how amazing your life can be if you understood some of the core principles that are available to all human beings. And you don't have to look this way. And I think that, again, one of the things that people worry about is if you speak a certain way and if you look a certain way, that you want to convert people, that you want to change people's lives. Like, I'm interested in making other people look the way I look. And that's completely not the case. I've just discovered that there's an experience of life that's available to every human being, whether you're religious, whether you're atheist or not. It's available to every single human being, and you don't have to believe in anything. You just have to see a different way of looking at life.
So you were born Sikh, and you decided to really study, really dig in and study it. And I love how you call it the God thing, doing the God thing. Excuse me, that's my little baby screaming in the background. I think he should be there. He's downstairs now. So I like the way you refer to it as doing the God thing, because to a lot of people, that's all it is. It's something they get out the way. And like you said, got to do prayers at 9 o'clock and then done. And then that's it. They feel like they've been a good human being. But then meanwhile, they're going out, breaking hearts, doing bad things, stealing drugs, all sorts. But no, I've got my turban, I've got my beard, I do my part at this time, I do my prayers. And they think that that's right. And I always found that super hypocritical. But that's something that you have decided to go and really study. And so if I'm not mistaken, what you're saying is, after having studied Sikhism, the religion you were born into, you found the interpretation of so for people who don't know, the Guru Granth Sahib is basically our last, it's the book of conduct, as you would say, I guess, right? For any other lack of other words, Satnam, like just the teachings of all the gurus before us.
It's the actual writings of the spiritual masters who we believe, experience the sorts of things that we're talking about. The spiritual masters of our tradition. It's their actual writings in their own hand.
Right, exactly. As opposed to, I think a lot of other people have difficulty in believing the words of other religions because they've been changed and edited down through the years, but by humans. By people who have literally gone, don't agree with that bit. Let's put it this way, or no, I think this will make more sense, right? Whereas here is the actual. And
I think a lot of scriptures have also been translated so many times that in the translation you also lose some of that meaning every time you change from one language to another. And again, in the Sikh spiritual tradition, there's a lot of focus on actually keeping the language as it is, so that you understand it for the core meaning. Yes, there are translations, but it's always seen as a secondary kind of quality. As soon as you translate it to a different language, you've lost some of that flavor. So this is the way the spiritual teachers have written it themselves, in those words. Understand those meanings, those words, and those connotations that come with that.
I have to ask you then, if you can outwardly just say you don't believe in God as such, the way that most people do, especially as a man in the sky, neither do I. I like to look at God as the universe, as forces of nature, of stuff that's happening, right? That's how I like to look at God. What is God to you? What is that? What is keeping you in this? What is pulling you towards this? What is your purpose? Because clearly this is your life's purpose. You're spreading this word. What is it to you? But do you pray?
Again, no, I won't say that I pray. But I have in my tradition, there's very little room for prayer, and there's a huge emphasis on praise. And praise is a completely different thing. So I wouldn't say that. Again, every time we talk about these things, you're brought up and being told that, you've got to read certain prayers, and the only way that we can translate those things are into prayer. But prayer literally means, dear Lord, I need this or I need that.
Right.
But within the Sikh tradition, they're saying, well, actually stop praying and start praising. And spend your whole life in appreciation for what life is. And I go back to your question about what is God itself. I think the easiest way that I can describe it is I think the closest that Hollywood has ever come to describing what God is in Star Wars, where they talk about the Force. And I literally have that experience. And for me, what has been personified into a male kind of character with a white beard sitting in the clouds was really always just life itself, the beauty of life, the force of life, Mother Nature. And it's been given so many different names, but to me it's that. And that's why I love this tradition so much, and is because the God that we talk about is always somewhere far away, whereas life and Mother Nature is connected to me. I'm born out of Mother Nature. Mother Nature is my mother. God is my mother. Life literally physically gave birth to me. Like, I'm made up of all the atoms and cells that you can find all around you. Like, I'm breathing life in when I breathe, and I'm breathing life out. So to me, you are connected. And I think for me, how I would describe God is literally just a oneness. The whole universe is actually fully connected with each other. And the more that we realize our connection, the less problems we're going to see in life, the less we're going to divide ourselves with other people and segregate ourselves and discriminate with different kind of races or classes or whatever. And we're going to realize, hey, we're actually all the same thing. We're literally all just different versions of life in different shapes and forms and sizes. And I think that to me is such a powerful God, because me and God are connected in that way.
I can totally understand and relate to that, man. I have so many things flying around my mind that I want to ask you, but I think I want to go off of what you are now saying. If that is the case, and prayers, as most people, as you're saying, right? Please don't let my dad. Please let my dad get better. Please let my dad get better. Please, blah blah blah. It's always. It's not like necessarily, but please let me get a Lamborghini. A lot of it is coming from a good place. Yeah. Please don't let my so-and-so get sick. Please let my son pass their exams. It's coming from a good place. Now, again, I'm a firm believer in putting out good energies and sort of whatever you talk about, right? Like they say, put it out to the universe. And that's a whole other thing. But do you think in that sense, prayers can work in that form if you are putting out a message to this oneness, to the universe, asking for good energy back? Do you think that can work in the way that you look at life and universe and God?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So there's a lot of, for me, prayer, I think, is really just an extension of affirmations. It's just a way of getting your mind into a particular mindset. So if every day you thought about, buying your favorite car, buying a Lamborghini, like the example that you've given, if you're going to think about that all day, every day, and that becomes your prayer, your mantra, then I do believe that as soon as you get enough money in the bank, you're going to go and buy that. Right. Because that's the thing, that's the mantra that your mind has been just going on and on and on about for years, preparing for it. Now, some people will argue that you manifested that, you co-created that. There's things about like the secret that, what you think about eventually comes true. And I think that's absolutely true. Whatever you think about will manifest in some way or another. Like, and even to the smallest things where I think we're praying all the time. But what I mean by that is we're literally just constantly thinking about things, and the way we think about them, eventually that's how we see the world. So if I think that everyone is out to get me, then my experience of life is always going to be scared and nervous. Everyone I look at is going to look like a person who is somehow out to get me, because that's the mantra that's going on in our mind. So I think prayer is actually something that we're all doing. We're all praying all the time, in the sense that we're always repeating certain narratives and stories in our mind.
Yeah. Adam, because I've always had difficulty fully explaining this kind of thing to you. And of course, because we all, we have our jokes about it and stuff like that. Is there anything you find hard to grasp about that concept?
Yeah, something that jumped into my head there as you were talking about it was, but you kind of already answered it, was, say for instance, you're in a bad relationship and you're praying, please let this work, please let it work. Or say for instance, you're in the throes of addiction and you're just like, oh God, please, give me release from this addiction. But, without addressing the external factors, say, obviously a relationship is bad. It's the external element. It's the person that, that you're in that scenario with. If you're in the throes of addiction, it's the drug of choice that, is poisoning your own body. So I guess in that regard, when you're praying for relief from those things or trying to, find a way through that, I guess what it sounds like you're saying is that, how can I best put it into words? If you keep on reaffirming in your mind over and over again that the problem is not me, it's this other person or some other thing that I need to complete me, then of course, by definition, that affirmation becomes self-fulfilling. So that's always where my disconnect with prayer has come, because like I've always thought of it more as like meditative, or like, you're sort of speaking to yourself in some regards, rather than I'm putting it as, you put a man in the sky with a beard and this, that, and the other.
I think for me, like meditation is such a big part of self-reflection. And I think that to me is where religion just took a massive turn for me. When I actually understood meditation and when I started practicing it, it became less about just relying on some magical force in the sky that's going to solve my problems. And it was a lot about self-reflection. It was about looking at, where have I done something wrong? What is it what are my personal character traits that I'm constantly repeating that are causing my life to appear in a certain ways? And so that kind of self-reflection element is such a huge part of meditation and spirituality. You can't distance the two. You can't separate the two. What's happening on the outside is a direct relationship with what's happening with you on the inside. So the more you fix the inside, I think one of the best quotes I ever heard was, if you want to change the world, change yourself. Like that's where it starts. You've got to go and first start changing yourself. And when you do that, then the world around you will change.
Can I talk about religion for a second? Because I really try not to get too heavy into religion, because people get so worked up about it. Because again, a lot of the time it's because we're brainwashed by our parents and other people. And don't talk about Islam. Don't talk about them. And to me, I've always thought, what a joke. Here we are trying to be under this false pretense that we're being good people because we're adhering to our religion strictly. But really, we're shitty people to each other because of it. If you think you're a good Muslim, and I think I'm a good Sikh, oh no, yeah, Muslim, you don't know shit, yeah, you blah, blah, blah. And what do you end up doing? You end up fighting. So religion, therefore, has caused more problems than it's done good. And I've always had an issue with that. And I've always had a massive, massive issue with that. So what do you say to those people who are so... Carry it, no.
I really don't think religion has caused the problems. I think it's massive egos that have caused the problem. Right. I think it's people who've used religion as a sort of tribalism, and for political reasons that have said, we belong to this religion, so we're going to distance ourselves from these people and these people. And I honestly don't think it's the core of the religion, of any religion or any spiritual teaching, that actually teaches you to discriminate against others.
Right.
I mean, everything that I've seen, every tradition is talking about love thy neighbor. Everyone's talking about how we're all children of that same one God or universe or master. We're all brothers and sisters. Recognize the human race as one. And those people who have gone and actually understood their spiritual tradition, I think they're not the ones causing the problems.
Absolutely.
I think it's the ones that are using it for their own personal gain, whether it's for money or power or whatever. It's those guys that are making that distinction and perpetuating the ideas that you need to kind of keep your tribal distances from each other.
I've always noticed that's so true, man. I've always noticed, because in the beginning, if you sort of break down a lot of religions now, I'm not a student of every religion like that, but there seems to be a very iconic image behind them all, right? Like Jesus Christ has the long beard and the long hair, and then even they talk about Samson and the Guru Nanak and all the gurus and all these people. And to me, I always thought, isn't that funny? We've kind of got all the same image. We all have this same kind of image of somebody, and to me, that person is really the same between us all. Yet we fight and say, no, our path is the right path. Our path is the right path. And when you're in a position like myself, who's got a kid with I'm born Sikh, and I have my wife is Hindu, and we have a kid. I am struggling to understand which path my children should be. Well, you know, of course we're teaching them both, but I know I have my beliefs of certain things. And what do you do in a situation like that? There's a lot. The world is in a situation where, like, a lot of people are having, you know, marriages outside of their religions and kids outside of their religion. And what advice would you give to those parents? How do you raise your kids with faith?
I think it's tough when we've been brought up our whole life with the understanding that these traditions are drastically different. And even in the kind of the way you kind of phrase the question, well, I'm definitely Sikh and my wife's definitely Hindu. And the more I've read into these traditions, the more I've realized, wow, there's so much similarity, especially in the traditions that stem out of India. There's so much similarity. It's like there's so much at the very core of what they're saying that's exactly the same. In fact, they even use the same language and the same terminology because it was basically just the same people that these traditions were talking to. So I would massively encourage you to look at what is the core principles of those traditions. And the core principles are drastically different to the practices of those traditions. So when we talk about what am I going to share with my kids, it's really like, well, when it's Diwali, what celebration should we do, and what dress should they wear, and what prayers should they say? And I'm doing the same with my kids. I'm saying, look, try and understand what's the deeper meaning. The deeper meaning is that we're all one. We're all connected. Every single human being is exactly the same thing. So it's when you go a little bit deeper and when you kind of just look at what are the values that these traditions are trying to teach us, then you'll notice that you should be able to just pick up the values from almost any tradition. Then the practice just becomes, what practice do I use to remember those values and retain those values? The practices are always for the values.
Right. So the issue I have with I think a lot of different religions and it's the fact that we say this, right? We're all one. But yet we do, whether we want to admit it or not, we pray to either person or a statue. And in Christianity, it's always, oh, Jesus Christ, our savior, who's meant to be the Son of God, yet they're praying to a human who they call the Son of God. That's their person they pray to. In our religion, even though we've been taught all of this, it's still pictures of Guru Nanak Dev Ji or pictures of Guru Gobind Singh Ji that we are praying to. And it seems, and in the Hindu faith, of course, that's even more confusing. We've got gold, wooden statues, marble statues of a monkey or an elephant god. How confusing is that to kids when they're going, well, I don't understand, Dad, you're bowing down to a wooden statue of a monkey man. And how do you explain that to children right? It's those parts that I think are very confusing. And
I think that's why it's really important. The kind of work that I'm doing is specifically to try and help people navigate through some of those traditions, to try and understand what exactly, I mean, I can only speak for the Sikh spiritual tradition, to kind of help people understand, look, this is really what it's talking about. Like, you praying to a drawing or a picture really is not going to do anything. You need to understand it a little bit more. And my effort is really to try and help people understand how they can deal with it on a day-to-day basis. How can they navigate through life? And to me, I think it's almost, you have to encourage people to kind of move beyond their religion into the spirituality that comes behind it. Because you know, it's almost as though we've got to a situation now where religion kind of binds you down and spirituality sets you free. And I really see that massive difference between the two. And again, it's going to be weird for people who are looking at me saying, well, you're clearly religious. And I honestly don't identify with myself as being religious. I identify as being someone who has broken away from the shackles of being tied down to one type of people, one group of people, one language, one culture. I'm honestly saying that I think that my spiritual practice has just meant that I don't feel any of those kind of bondages and barriers that we create with religion.
The guilt. Let's talk about guilt. It's a big part of it. Guilt to question. Let's talk about that. People feel guilty to question. How dare you say that humans weren't created from Adam and Eve? How dare you? How dare you say this? How dare you say that if I, what would happen though? Seriously, if you're fasting, what would happen if you swallowed your own spit? Is that bad? Does that make you a bad Muslim? These are crazy things that people don't want to talk about, but very, very natural to talk about. But we don't bring them up. It's too awkward. It's too difficult.
Well, that was something, just to jump in quickly, was very appealing to what you just said to me, because it's like I've always, consider myself a good person, and I try and live a life of like maybe putting others before myself, sometimes at the cost of my own emotional and spiritual well-being, but more often than not, I like to do nice things for people because they make me feel good, because obviously there is a joy you get from seeing someone react from something nice that you've done for them. I've always been envious, jealous is the wrong word, envious of attaining higher spiritual knowledge, because I see all the attractive layers of spirituality and religion, and it's just, as I think as Jay was saying there, it's like, then what distracts me is the concept of guilt and suffering, and you're a bad person if you do this or this, that, and the other. And it says, how do you extract one from the other without removing the structure of a faith?
And I think in order to progress in spirituality, I think you absolutely need to break the structure of the faith. You absolutely need to go beyond those rules and rituals. You've got to see what was the purpose of any of those. And I think, it goes back to this question, Jay, that you asked around, how scared people feel to just question. And my mentality has always been, if you don't question, you don't learn. So absolutely every single part of any tradition, whatever you want to practice, you literally have to just say, what does this mean for me? Does this actually make sense to me? Do I understand why I'm doing it? And does it actually help me in any way? Does it progress my understanding of myself? Does it help me feel better in any way? And if it doesn't, am I just doing it out of fear? And I mean, you should not be doing anything out of fear or guilt. And there's going to be so many people who belong to a religion. So, well, that's pretty much what we've been doing. And I've been saying for years, you're wasting your time. You're absolutely wasting your time if your religion is just practicing something out of fear, just in case there's a God at the end of life that kind of has a list of all the things that I've done. I've got to, I can do 100 bad things, but at least I did those 5 or 10 good things. And that's absolutely not the right way to look at life. You really got to start looking at, I honestly see spiritual masters as nothing to do with any of those things. And I just see them as the people who figured out happiness, how to be happy at every moment. And I aspire to that, because I say, actually, that's what I'm looking for. And I think that's what all human beings are looking for, true happiness.
Absolutely.
And the reason that the spirituality makes so much sense to me, and meditation and mindfulness makes so much sense to me, is because it genuinely makes me a happier person. Right. So Adam, going back to what you were saying about, I think there's this kind of this idea that all religions teach you the same thing. Like they all teach you to be a good person. They all teach you to be kind and don't hurt another person and don't cheat and all that. And I honestly don't believe that's what it's about at all. I really think these spiritual masters, the Jesus, the Buddha, the Guru Nanaks of the world, they came and said, hey, I'm having a totally different experience of life compared to you. And I want to show you how to get that. And I think that's where it's making more sense. It's more about mental well-being than it is anything else.
Because I find myself, honestly, not many people know this, I developed a mild OCD because of religion and because of my faith. Because what happens is when you go into a religious place, whether it's a temple, gurdwara, there are practices involved in that. Remove your shoes before you enter the temple. Cover your head before you enter the temple. Matha tek, bow head down and touch your forehead on the ground in front of. Oh, but don't stand in with your feet towards the bow. Oh, there's all these little things. Don't do that when this is happening. And so it becomes a ritual. There's a ritual involved. And it got to the point where, what do? When you go past a temple, drive past a temple, and what we call is we matadek, right? Which is literally the forehead down, we're bowing down. So every time we'd go past a temple, Gurdwara, I would bow my head down like this. And I did that out of ritual. It was habit. But then what happened, that got associated with, if you don't do that, something bad's going to happen to your family. Something bad's going to happen to you. You're not going to pass your exams if you don't do this every time you go past a Gurdwara. And that started to really affect me in a negative way. But then I was still, the fear that God might punish me or God might do something, cause something physiological, literally cause a psychological effect in my body.
And I think that's the case for so many people, which is just your whole practice is based on fear. And it should be the other way around. Your entire practice should be based on love. If you're not doing it out of love, then don't do it. And but in order to get that love for whatever it is that you're supposed to love, whether it's a God thing or whatever, then you've got to put in that effort. You've got to work at it. And so, I mean, the example that I use with my kids is I always tell them that, look, meditating on a daily basis is like learning how to swim. Like, you don't want to learn how to swim when you fall into deep waters. You want to learn how to swim, and then so that when or if you fall into difficulty in life, you know how to navigate through that and how to deal with that. And so for me, if I'm bowing down to something, I'm bowing down out of so much love and reverence. Like, wow, you taught me how to deal with life. Thank you. You taught me how to find happiness. You taught me how to overcome stress and worries and depression and anxiety. You taught me that. That bowing is coming from a completely different space. It's there's like zero fear involved. It's totally out of reverence. But I can say that, I mean, and this is true of you'll know this, Jay, of so many traditions in India. You bow down to that person who you respect or you revere. Like in India, we'll kind of put our heads down and touch our feet, whether that's your grandparents, whether that's your music teacher, whoever that is, anyone that you think is superior or wiser to you in any way. You're bowing down to a wisdom that's totally transformed your life. You're not bowing down out of fear that they're going to punish you in some way.
Right. And I think that, one of the hardest things for me to deal with, and I thought about this, when I went to a funeral for the first time and I saw these people cry, it was obviously horrific. And there's a religious element involved, isn't it? You don't just go to get the body cremated, you go to the temple first. It's always tied in. And I remember feeling so angry at the first time somebody who I loved died. Because I prayed that they wouldn't. And I prayed, please don't let them die. Please don't let them die. Please keep them around for a little longer. And I was so angry because I felt, and this was, of course, I wasn't questioning stuff. I was younger. I felt, I asked you something and I was good and I did all the things that I was supposed to do. And you still took them away from me. And that removed temporarily some faith from me. And then what happened? I felt guilty about me losing the faith. And it was all bad. It was all negative. I couldn't find the positive in any of it. So can we talk about that? Can we talk about how when you lose somebody or something bad happens to you, how do you keep your faith? Is it just chance? Is it coincidence? Is there any way to prevent it? Is there any point in putting out good vibes? All of that. Let's cover that.
So again, in certainly in the Sikh spiritual tradition, the amount of time that the tradition spends in training you on the inevitability of death and getting you comfortable with death. I mean, it's something for me, I've been teaching my kids since they were 2 years old. Wow. And it's so different to how normal society treats death. And for us, because that's something that's so ingrained in our tradition, death is coming. It's normal. I would say it's so ridiculous for someone to pray to a God and say, please don't let them die. Of course we do it out of love, but it's such a ridiculous idea that you're praying to life and saying that don't take life away. Whereas anyone who goes through this spiritual sort of training, and I actually call it a training, it's a mental training that you start to understand life can't happen without death. Like everything that the very fact that you're alive is because you've eaten things and you've killed things in order to stay alive. Whether it's a plant, whether it's an animal, doesn't make a difference. Your aliveness is dependent on the death of others. And that's the beautiful game of life. It's the circle of life. That's how it works. So for you to then have this unrealistic expectation and fear of death, or this unrealistic aversion to something that's an absolute certainty in life, is such an unrealistic way, an unhealthy way to think.
Absolutely.
And spirituality is teaching you, no, death is happening. The more that you become comfortable with it, the more you start to enjoy your life, knowing that your own death is coming. And I think the reason people pray for other people to stay alive is really because we're completely not willing to even look at our own death. And in the Sikh spiritual tradition, the whole idea is know that you're going to die, be so comfortable with it that every moment becomes a joy, knowing that death is coming, knowing that that's an eventuality, that I always think of it like this exam that's coming. You know, if you're in school and there's a test that's coming and everyone around you is saying, don't talk about it, don't talk about it. And I'm sitting there thinking, no, we absolutely should talk about it. Like, why aren't you preparing for it? This test is coming. This exam is coming. And the people who are going to struggle are the ones who pretended like it wasn't going to be there. And the people who are not going to struggle are the ones that have been preparing for it their whole life and saying, hey, didn't you know it was coming? Of course it's coming. You're going to die and everyone around you is going to die. It's so healthy for you to think in that way. Like one of the things I recommend people do is that I wake up every morning and I say to myself, today could be the day I die. And that's like a little mantra that I do with myself.
Interesting.
And the reality is that if you knew that today was your last day, like it was actually possible for you to die today, then how would you navigate through life? How angry would you get at people? How stressed would you get? How annoyed would you get when you're stuck in a traffic jam? You would just treat life so differently. And if every day you thought today might be the day I die, one day that's actually going to come true. And we create such unrealistic expectations. We think we all deserve to die at 100. Like everybody has to live to 100
That's the
years.
thing, isn't it?
And if they don't, somehow life has been cruel to you.
Cruel to you. 100%. And I think that's a very common thing in Indian culture, especially because it's the screaming and the crying. Oh, why did you have to take? Why did you have to go? All of that is so horrific that it kind of, especially for kids, Jesus, I mean, being around that is, and this was when I was younger, and that's when I think I started looking inward, because I started thinking, these are things that were out of my control. This could keep happening all the time. Where I'm going to be a mess if things that are beyond my control, external things, can affect me this heavily. So I think that's when I started looking inwardly. But how would you help people? Like, for example, if, like Adam, you kind of touched on it. You try to be a good person. You really do. And you're a wonderful guy and you do a lot for people. But if you're this person who is doing so much great stuff on a daily basis, but shit things keep happening to
why do bad things happen to good people?
Yeah. And that's honestly a question that I asked Deepak Chopra about it. He could, obviously we didn't have much time to talk about it. But the reason I asked that question is because it is something, whether we want to admit it or not, we all go through this. I don't get why that happened. I tried to do good. Why did that have to happen to me? Oh, you know what? Forget it. I'm not going to do good anymore. I'm not going to be nice to that person anymore. Fuck it. I get shat on everywhere I go. I'm just not going to do it anymore.
The reason I think we get into that way of thinking is really based on the expectations that we set on life. Like every day, unconsciously, we're setting so many expectations. So, for example, like a classic thing that we do definitely in the UK is every day we check the weather and then we shrug our shoulders when we see that it's going to be cloudy. Now, what does that actually mean? What it means is unconsciously you set an expectation in your mind that was, it should be sunny today. And when the reality doesn't actually meet your expectation, that's where you're going to feel like, something's gone wrong in your life. And unconsciously, we're doing that all day, every day, that we are thinking of the perfect scenario of what life should be like. And really, the happiness that you feel in life, the way you're going to overcome the idea that bad things are happening in my life is not when good stuff starts happening. It's when whatever starts happening feels good. When you can just be comfortable with whatever is happening in life, no matter what. Like I have this, like this, for me, one of the best mantras in life is, if it comes, let it come. If it goes, let it go.
Let it go. Yeah, I
and
love
if you
that.
just focus on whatever life throws at you, I'm not going to resist it. It's that resistance that we have in our mind, which makes us interpret life as bad. And the reality is there's no real thing as good or bad. And some people will think, hey, that's terrible. We've gone through so much with COVID-19 these days, and so many people have lost their lives and so many things. We think, well, surely that's bad. And my response to that is, it's only bad if you let it be bad. The reality is, it's life. If it's out of your control, it's natural. That's all it is.
Right.
If you're going to create this story in your mind that it's negative, then it's going to feel negative. And the way your life's going to get better is not by changing the stuff that you can't control. It's just by changing how you think about life.
What would you do? What would you say to somebody who, I'm trying, I'm reading all these books about spirituality. I'm trying to do this. Nothing's changing. Because again, we're expecting a result. They're doing this because they're expecting a result. They're not happy with the way their life is now. So they're seeking help. Whether they're watching videos, whether they're reading books, but nothing seems to be changing, Satpal.
I think it's that it goes back to then creating more expectations. And for me, it really isn't about creating any new expectation. It's about finding a way to be comfortable with whatever is happening in the present moment. Literally right here, right now, practice. And this is why I tell my kids, it's like learning how to swim. Every day, practice just being okay with this moment. Like, don't create any expectation for the next moment. Like, see if you can find, I recommend people spend 24 hours where you're going to have for the next day 0 resistance. Like, actually practice that in your life, where anything that happens, you say, I'm okay with it. Whatever happens, I'm okay with it. That is where you start to see so much joy and peace in your life, where you just realize, I'm just going to let go. Like, yes, some stuff is going to happen. Sometimes things are going to happen that are stressful or that need my attention, or I need to make a quick decision, and sometimes difficult things happen, but I'm not going to resist it. I'm going to respond to it. I'm going to do it because the situation requires me to do it. But in my mind, I'm not going to have this resistance like it shouldn't have happened. It's happening, and I'm just going to go with it. Just go with the flow as much as possible.
Do you want to say something?
Yeah, we should make that a challenge online, the 24-hour resistance challenge.
Yeah, dude. I think so many people are lost, Satpal, whether we want to admit it or not. There's a lot of people are lost, which is why I think so many people, like I said, read books, watch this, and they'll do it secretly. Sometimes they don't want to ask people for help. They don't want, or they're embarrassed, right? And then they try to do it. And I think that we're all trying to navigate through this crazy thing called life. Nobody quite knows how to do it. We tried to, back in the day, set guidelines and such called religions. Here's, I think, the way that we should live life and you'll probably be happy. Here's how you do it, right? We all did this. And then I think the rat race of life, especially now, is so intense, because back in the day, you couldn't see what people were doing as much. And so the stress of life was probably a little less. You could tell, your cousin got better grades than you, and your uncle, he's got a new job in so-and-so. That's kind of what you knew. But now we're looking at everyone, people who aren't even important in our life, and we're comparing our lives to theirs on social media. So the question I ask you is, how do you find some, yes, the easy one would be don't go on social media, but let's say you have to, you yourself are on social media. And I'm sure, maybe you don't want to admit or not, I'm sure there's ways that you look at it going, oh man, I only got 10,000 likes on that one. What did I do? Maybe did I edit it wrong? Oh, maybe they don't care about what I'm saying. Is what I'm saying important? Is it? We're all going through this. And I go through it myself, mate. And I'm like, oh man, okay. So, I guess this is the way that we have to stay relevant. This is the way that how do you find peace amongst the madness?
It's huge, man. Social media and the pressure of always producing more, better content, always producing something that's going to have more likes, more shares. It's kind of built into kind of the nature of the work that we're doing, is that you always want to be able to measure the quality and that you put out there. And I think what I have to remind myself, and this is also true when you see sort of people leaving negative comments online, what I have to remind myself is for every single person who leaves a negative comment, there are so many people whose lives are being benefited by the kind of stuff that that you do and you put out there. As long as you're being positive and you're doing something that's improving people's lives, I think you always have to balance it out. And one of the policies that I make is I'm never going to respond to negative comments, because why would I focus on that when there are thousands of positive comments and I don't spend my time responding to every single one of those? Why am I going to spend my time on that one negative guy? So really, it's just about balance. And I'm literally getting people on a regular basis that are sending me messages like, hey, I was about to commit suicide and I watched one of your videos and it changed my life. Like that to me is so huge. If you've just done that for one person, that's game over. That's it. Your work is worth it. You know, you've actually helped people. And I'm sure that's the case with whatever content you're putting out there. I'm sure your music has changed so many people's lives. So it's keeping that in mind and that perspective in mind, then you realize how important it is the work that you're doing is in helping and kind of shape people's lives and people's mindset.
No, I think, and also, you know what, all those people who might have liked it, they just might not have typed a comment. Doesn't mean they didn't like it. Do you know what I'm saying? And that's the difference. And I always have to remind myself that there were probably tons of people who watched it, laughed, had a great laugh, enjoyed it, listened to it, but just didn't happen to leave a comment. I just didn't see it physically. Right. Okay. So, man, I'm loving all of this. Adam, is there anything that you wanted to touch on or anything that is, you know, you wanted to say?
Yeah. One of my biggest, one question I would have is, let's say, for instance, for me, I'm starting from square one because as I said, I have no doctrine of faith. I have certain beliefs, you know, like we all have a little, you know, spiritual quirks or, you know, traditions or whatever, like I still observe Christmas and yada, yada, yada. But for a person in my position, let's stay starting from square one, without a doctrine of faith, where would one start to sort of like encourage some spiritualism, in their life, to bring some knowledge, some peace, to start making effective changes in my life?
I think you've got to be very clear in your mind what it is that you're looking for. Like it's true of any project that you want to start. Let's say you want to learn how to play an instrument. The goal is so clear in my mind. I want to learn how to play the guitar. So once the goal is clear, and I think you touched on some of that, like I want to feel more peace in my life. That's your goal. Forget faith, forget religion, forget spirituality and all those things. Now you've got to then figure out who's the person who I think in my immediate vicinity or online or social media or whoever, who's the person that I can see that has what I want. Like if you wanted to learn how to play the guitar, the first thing you do is think, well, who do I know that can do it better than I can?
Right.
And I go and learn from them. So it's so clear as soon as you know what your goal is, and the goal should not be God or spirituality or even finding a community. It's about how do I feel better in my life? And then you've just got to go find those people that feel better. And I think nobody is starting from scratch. Everybody has that kind of impulse within them that they just want to feel a little bit better. I think every human being is looking for happiness. We're all walking around with this massive void inside of us, this kind of hole that we're trying to fill with materialism or relationships or drugs or whatever it is. We're trying to fill this hole. And you've got to just get to a point where you realize, hey, nothing on the outside that I've tried seems to have filled that hole, or it might temporarily do that, but it's never lasting. So there's got to be something better out there. And I think once you start to self-reflect and analyze what is it that I'm looking for? Am I just doing it because I feel like I'm missing a community? Am I just doing it because I feel a little bit like I left out of the loop? Or is there something deeper, intrinsic in my life that I'm missing? When you know that, then you'll know what how you're going to go about filling it.
Adam, I think what Satpal was saying earlier was really interesting about how just let it happen. Just let it happen to you, like the no path and no resistance. And I think that's probably a good starting point, you know, is to just accept that. And I did. I was going through one of those phases where I kept thinking there was a reason for everything. You know, I think as you're trying to figure life out, what was the meaning of that? Oh, that's a sign. Oh, that's amazing. Do you believe in signs, Satpal? Do you believe in things that happen? Is that for a reason? Oh, that's a sign. Should I be lit? Can the universe communicate with us? Is it communicating with us? Is it trying?
I think the universe is communicating with us in ways that we don't understand how to recognize. To me, the very fact that the universe is giving you breath, that's communication. Like every day you wake up, that's the universe saying, hey, I want you to be alive. Like you don't know when you go to sleep that you're going to wake up. We take it for granted. But to me, breathing is my conversation with the universe. Like I'm actually having this great experience with life itself. And I'm so grateful just for the fact that I'm breathing. Like I don't feel the need to want anything more or expect anything more. Like I don't need any signs. To me, being alive is a sign. To me, the fact that I wake up and I'm healthy, that's a sign. The fact that I have my family around me and I've got some money in the bank and I've got food in the fridge, those are all the signs that I need. I don't need any other signs, because otherwise we're saying it's a sign for something more. Like again, it goes back to those expectations. Are we creating some expectations? Then we're just looking for anything to validate those expectations in our mind. And what I'm thinking is, you know what, you're being blessed every moment. The fact that you're breathing is such a big deal. There's so many people that are just struggling to breathe. You're breathing.
Especially
that's a huge deal.
Exactly.
You know, that's to me what spirituality is. It's the fact that when you breathe, you feel so high, so much joy, that just from the fact that you're alive. Being alive is the joy of life itself. You don't need anything else. You're not trying to fill it with something else.
Thank you so much for all of this. I think there's so many things that I still want to know, and maybe we need to have a part 2. But is there anything you think is really important for the people who are listening that we might not have touched on, that you might want to share with us as part of your journey of what you're trying to achieve?
Thank you so much for just having me on here. I suppose I'm not really coming with any kind of agenda or any ideas. It's just really an opportunity wherever possible to kind of talk to people and say, you know what, whatever you're going through in life, whether you're down, whether you've got issues with, you know, relationships, with money problems, with jobs, and all these kind of stresses and worries, all the things that we're going through as human beings, you know what, there are people that figured this out. There are people that figured out how to navigate through the waves of life, where the waves don't hit you that hard, you know, where life doesn't affect you that deeply. And human beings have sorted this stuff out. We've figured out happiness. It's done. It's there. It's been written down. You don't have to follow a dogma or anything like that. But I massively encourage people. It's like people going out and spending every day saying, hey, I know I need to be happy. And they're trying all the wrong methods of happiness. Like when we're kids, we're taught money can't buy you happiness. And yet our whole life, we just grow up, go to school, go to university, get a job so that we can get more money, so that we can buy stuff in the hope that it can make us more happy. And when we realize that money isn't making us happy, then we'll try relationships, then we'll try other things. You know, I always ask this question, if money is the way to make us happy, then are the richest people in the world the happiest people in the world? And we all know that that's not true. That's not the way. So we're all just following the wrong method of happiness, and the right methods of happiness have been figured out. You've just got to go, and it's available to you for free. It's all there. Just go and find this stuff out. And you don't have to be afraid that you have to change your whole life, that you've got to look a certain way, or you've got to stop eating certain things, you've got to stop doing something. Like, that's not the way of happiness. The way of happiness has been figured out in terms of less resistance towards the problems in life, you know, kind of understanding and not being so attached towards your family and problems, not being so attached to your ideas of yourself and your opinions. Like, these are the things that are all there, and we can go into this, like,
can I interrupt this, you know? Yeah, can I interrupt you really quickly there? Because of course, you know, I know even in our faith, they talk about attachment as being something we should try to work on and not try to be so attached. It's hard when it comes to the people you love.
Of course.
If I asked you, Satpal, with your children as a dad, if I asked you, it'd be, hey man, just don't be so attached to your kids, bro. Come on. Yeah. I can't do that. I'll be honest with you. You ask me to not be so attached to my children, I do not know where to begin. Talk me a little bit through that process.
And this is where I go again and again, because this literally is something that you've got to practice on a day-to-day basis. And I'll give you my absolute honest personal practice that I do. So for me, I'm dropping my kids to school every day. I do the school run. I go and drop them every day to school. When I get out of the car and walk to the school and let them go into the school every single day when I leave home and leave my, say goodbye to my wife, and I go to work, there's a part of me that very clearly makes a decision in my mind. As I'm saying goodbye to my loved ones, I make a decision in my mind. That could be the last time that I see them.
Come on.
I do that every single day. And that practice means that every day I'm getting more and more comfortable with the idea that that could be the last time that I see them. And I know through years and years of practice at this stuff, I'm so comfortable with that idea now. Hey, that can happen. And I'm not saying that if something bad was to happen to my loved ones, that I'm not going to shed a tear, that I'm not going to feel pain. But I know that I'm not going to hold on to that pain for long periods the way people do. Like I'll go through, of course, we're all parents at the end of the day. There's like a biological love that you have towards your kids. But it's this practice that I've been doing for so many years that I'm okay with the idea of me dying. I'm okay with the idea of other people that I love around me dying, because it's going to happen. And I'm just blindly obvious that this thing is going to happen, that I'm just going to not ignore it like everyone else seems to ignore it and think, if I ignore it, it's going to go away. No, it's not going to go away. The more that you become comfortable with it, the more you're just going to be, you're going to be less and less attached to your family and your loved ones. And it's a great way to live, because every moment that you spend with them, you have such a great connection with so much joy, knowing that could be the last time and being okay with it.
Wow. I guess it's like what they say, isn't it? It's like, you get disappointed and unhappy when you expect a different result. And that's really what it is. If you're blatantly going, you are basically stating common sense out towards to yourself. You're literally saying, yeah, that could be. Most people don't want to believe that. It's too hard to say that. It's too hard to admit that. So we push it under the carpet and we pretend it doesn't exist. And then when stuff like that does happen, we are not equipped to cope and how to handle that situation.
When I was growing up, like your parents would actively say, like, don't talk about death. And it was almost like your mums would be worried that if you talk about death around the dinner table, like somehow you're inviting death into your life. And my attitude has always been, death has never waited for my invitation. Death is not waiting for me to invite it. So I'm okay talking about it, and I'm okay talking about it to my kids, because I know it's an inevitability. And I don't think it's morbid, and I don't think it's a terrible way to look at life and to raise kids. I think it's a fantastic way to just deal with the reality of life itself. Don't kid yourself about it.
So really quickly, let me just quickly touch on that, because there is something that confuses me about the notion of what you just said. You just said, don't talk about, your parents said, or your elders said, don't talk about it because it invites death. Now, we were earlier talking about the universe, and what you put out there is what you're going to get back. So if you are talking about death a lot and thinking about death a lot and saying this could happen anytime, isn't the signal you're giving out to the universe, come and get me, I'm all right, I'm ready for it? Isn't it a little bit confusing?
I don't think you are. Like, look, I honestly, like when I said before about how what you think about manifests, for me, that's why I use the word affirmations. I think the more you think about something, the more you're going to draw towards it. What I'm thinking about is, I'm not thinking about death. I'm thinking about being okay with death. That's what I'm thinking about every day. So when death comes, I'm okay with it. I'm not inviting death into. I'm not saying, please let that happen.
Right.
I'm saying that could happen. And what's my mindset? I'm okay with it. I create no unrealistic expectation in my life that it can't happen. I'm saying it's happening all around me. People are birth and death is happening at every moment all around me. I'm just not going to be naive to think that it's not happening to me. I'm more just going to go and align myself with the reality of life itself.
Right. That actually makes sense. It's what you're placing the emphasis on within that. Makes sense, bro. Thank you. I've loved this conversation. I hope.
Thank you.
No, thank you.
Yeah, man. Adam, didn't I tell you this is going to be a very different type of basement banter? And so
yes,
it's still banter, but in just such a, an insightful way. And I think that, there's so much to learn about life and people. And like you said, there are people who figured it out. And Satpal, you are spreading the word of that. And I think that's great because, I always said, even with my career, me being the first sort of Indian mainstream artist, wasn't really anybody before me I could ask and go, what do you say when they come with a blatantly racist comment like that? What did you say? There was nobody. I had to kind of figure it out by myself as I was going along. But like you said, these hardships, they've been there from the beginning of time. Human beings have had to come across anxiety, stress, love, detachment, all of these poverty, all of this shit from the beginning of time. So I think we all, need somewhere to listen. So I hope the people who have listened to this podcast learned something, because I certainly did, man. Thank you so much, brother.
Thank you so much for
And
having me.
where can they learn more? What?
Oh yes, please.
Yeah, and what socials? Yeah, where can our listeners learn more?
Well, yeah, everyone can follow me on Instagram and Facebook, Satpal, Sathpal. And I post videos and content on social media. You can kind of look me up. I have a non-profit organization called Nanak Naam, which is just all about spreading this wisdom in English, and it's freely available. And we're available on podcasts and YouTube and Facebook and every social channel, really just kind of spreading the love, spreading positivity to as many people as possible.
It's beautiful, bro. I watch your videos regularly. I love them. And I highly encourage you guys to watch the videos. It's just really, really beautiful, in-depth stuff. So big up, man, bro. Enjoy the rest of your week. And is it the week? What day is it? Tuesday it is. Yeah, I've lost count. But let's catch up soon, all right?
Thanks so much, man. Thanks for having me. Hope I really enjoyed it. Hope you guys have a good day as well.
Definitely, bro. And we'll make sure, we put all the socials up in the stuff so people can come and check it out, man.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.